If you work in construction or you've just been looking to do some good old lockdown DIY over the past year, you may have noticed some strange movements in the world of lumber. But if you haven't heard, the price of lumber, which is a type of processed wood, has increased by quite a lot over the past year. And these extortionate prices can be felt in a number of different countries, but the US is where it's becoming a bit more of a problem, as most homes are timber frame, unlike in the UK where we tend to use block and brick. Still, if you're eyeing up a new shed or thinking of putting down some decking, I wouldn't blame you for putting it off for a little while. You know, pre-pandemic, the lumber industry in the US was under a bit of strain. Prices remained pretty flat and peaked at just over $440, and that was down from the 2018 peak of just over $600. So sawmills were betting on higher prices in the future and were already scaling back on production, and some even shut down in 2019. But then 2020 happened. As the virus spread, this resulted in labour shortages at sawmills and in the supply chains as workers were staying at home. There were also expectations that construction would grind to a halt and the demand for lumber would therefore decline. And the price of lumber did decline back in March last year, but it's pretty much just shot up since then, minus a few minor pullbacks. Now, those labour shortages meant that the industry couldn't quickly respond to demand shocks since production couldn't be scaled up quickly enough, and boy was there a demand shock. So to start with, the Fed took an extremely accommodative monetary policy stance in the form of massive quantitative easing and record low interest rates. So this brought down borrowing costs in the economy, including obviously the interest rate on mortgages, which made mortgages more appealing. At the same time, we also saw a huge rise in the level of savings, as we covered in a previous video a couple of weeks ago. And builders were ready to pick up their hammers again after isolating at home. So demand for new homes, renovations, and ultimately lumber began to increase before the supply side could actually respond. And by March this year, house building had reached the highest level since 2006. So Visual Capitalist had a pretty striking visualization of the impact. Back in May 2020, $50,000 worth of lumber could build just over 10 single-family houses. But in 2021, just a year later, $50,000 would only be enough to build 2 and a bit houses. According to the National Association of Home Builders, the cost of building a single-family home increased by $36,000 this year. Now we're at a point where sawmills just can't respond to demand quickly enough. And this is a similar story to what we've been seeing happening in the semiconductor industry, which you may have seen in our videos on that topic recently as well. So if you're a builder or a carpenter, you may be wondering what's going to happen with lumber prices next. And the honest answer is, who knows? Many analysts expect that there's still more upside as demand remains strong and lots of ongoing projects are still going ahead, but many also think that prices will soon hit a high, not because supply will catch up, but just because demand will soon start to drop off. However, there are a couple of other options that could be on the table to try and relieve prices. One could be completely removing the Trump administration's tariffs on Canadian lumber. Part of these tariffs have already been removed last year, but a 9% tariff does still remain in place. However, this may also be the year that we start seeing more innovation in home building to counter such high prices. We're already starting to see DIYers opt for things like composite decking over more traditional woods due to the high cost. However, the high cost of commodities isn't just limited to lumber either. This is also part of a wider trend that we've been seeing with corn, soybean, copper, even iron ore, which could all ultimately feed through into inflation. So obviously this is something we'll be keeping an eye on, and I'm sure we'll be covering it in future videos, but hopefully that's brought you up to speed, and that's all that we're going to cover for now. So as always, I'd love to read your thoughts in the comment section, and please do hit that thumbs up button to support the channel. I really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.